All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Quiet, the Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking by Susan Cain. So let's get right into it. So in chapter 1, she talks a lot about introverts versus extroverts. So the term introversion, extroversion, and ambiversion comes from the psychologist Carl Jung. He coined these terms, and today there's a connotation around these terms that basically introverts are very soft-spoken and extroverts are very outgoing. I'm here to tell you that that is not the case. That may be the case sometimes, but not always. The definition behind these terms is actually how you get your energy. So, for example, introverts tend to get their energy by being alone, and extroverts tend to get their energy by being with other people. So, a good way to determine whether you're an introvert and extrovert is take a time where you were very tired, and in response to that tiredness, what did you do? Did you go out with friends? Did you stay home and watch TV or something? And that's one way that you can determine whether you're introverted or extroverted. Um, so in today's world, Susan Cain and many others claim that the extrovert ideal is because people prefer extroverts over introverts. This goes all the way back to when people migrated from Europe to the United States. She believes that if given the choice, people who are more extroverted were the ones that decided to go explore a new world, and people that were introverted decided to stay home. So she claims that there are many more extroverts than introverts in the United States, and many more introverts than extroverts back in Europe and Asia. So this leads me to my next point, personality versus character. She uses a very good anecdote to explain personality versus character. She explains how a young man by the name of Dale Carnegie grew up on a farm all his life, and then he eventually branches out to move to a big city and become a salesperson, and then later a person who is considered a professional public speaker. He later goes to his local YMCA and gives classes and even writes a book and becomes known for his public speaking abilities. Um, and she said that this is one anecdote of many that explains the change from the culture of personality from the culture of character. So the culture of character was when people really focused on what they did behind closed doors, and then the culture of personality is focused on what people give off, so what impression they leave other people. And that is how today's society focuses on what others think of us rather than who we truly are as a person. So then on to chapter 2, the myth of charismatic leadership. Susan Cain talks a lot about how if we always go with the extroverts as a leader, we lose many good ideas. So assuming that extroverts and introverts have the same amount of good ideas and bad ideas, if we listen to the extrovert 80% of the time and introverts 20% of the time, we're going to get all of the extroverts' good ideas and then some of their bad ideas, and then only 20% of the introverts' good ideas and none of their bad ideas. So if we focus, So if we focus on really choosing good ideas rather than focusing on who is giving off a better version of their ideas, I think we would be much more successful. And then this brings me to my next point, talking equals smarter. So this kind of means that I'm sure we all have been in a group setting where we have had to talk out loud to give answers or something along those lines. And Susan Cain claims that people that are better at speaking out and giving these answers tend to come across as smarter, even though grade point averages and SAT scores have proven that those who talk more are not always smarter. So she believes that in order to really determine who is smarter, you don't have to use these group settings to determine that. And then this also leads me to my next point, talkers as leaders. So those who tend to talk a lot, I would argue, as well as Susan Cain would argue, that they are normally the ones that get these leadership roles. So if you put extroverts and introverts into a group, the extroverts are normally the ones that are going to get these leadership roles. But these are not always the best leaders. They very well could be, but not always. Introverted leaders are normally leaders that consider the whole group's perspective, and then extroverts are usually, once again, not always, leaders that like to take their idea and run with it and have the group run along with them. So as you can see in this visual aid, actually all of these leaders are introverts, and they are considered to be some of the most successful people in the world. So that is just proof behind our claim that introverts can be good leaders. So then chapter 3, it is when collaboration kills creativity. So introverts and extroverts benefit from being able to go off on their own and consider solutions in different situations for certain tasks. This is something that introverts tend to do more naturally, but we believe that if in a group setting, everyone is able to go off on their own and think of a certain solution or their own solution and then come back to the group and present their solution or just talk about their solution with the rest of the group, this would be a much more productive and efficient way of coming up with solutions as opposed to groupthink, which is basically just everybody sitting in a circle talking. Introverts believe that there's a very sweet spot for themselves and everybody else when you can go on your own and think of a solution. And then Susan Cain talks a lot about deliberate practice, and it's basically your level of concentration and who you're with when you practice. So deliberate practice isn't necessarily just practicing with the team. Deliberate practice is, actually it's even more explained in this visual aid I have on screen. So for example, we'll take a golfer who imagines their ball trajectory and then they execute what they think is going to give them that imagined trajectory. And then they compare their desired shot and their actual shot. So deliberate practice is very concentrated, focused, and very individual, as opposed to practice where you can be practicing with a team or a group or whoever. And then group collaboration, we believe needs to be critiqued by having smaller groups, and then also that fact that you should be able to go off on your own to solve a problem. There have been numerous studies shown where group collaboration becomes less successful the larger the group. So a group of 9 is much less successful than a group of 4. And then we believe that that group of 4 would be even more so successful if they all had time to go off on their own and think of a solution. And then finally in chapter 3, Susan Cain talked about the introvert and extrovert relationships. So introverts and extroverts talk and collaborate in so many different settings in everyday life. And we believe that if the facts that we have talked about and situations we will talk about are considered and critiqued to where they can benefit introverts and extroverts more so, then not only will introverts be more benefited, but extroverts will as well. And we can lead to a more successful business or anything else in the world.
Chapter 4 of the book Quiet centers around the ideas of temperament and personality. Temperament, according to Cain's research, refers to inborn, biologically based behavior and emotional patterns that are observable in infancy and early childhood. And on the other hand, personality is the complex brew that emerges after cultural influence and personal experience are thrown into the mix of your life. A professor named Jerome Kagan, who is on the left, has devoted his entire career to the emotional and cognitive development of children and decided to do a study on this. They gathered 500 4-month-old infants, and using a series of observations to the reactions of things like colors and toys, they determined they could somewhat predict whether they would become introverts or extroverts based off of their reactions to the colors and toys. This is also called environmental reactivity. The high reactivity and low reactivity correspond to introversion and extroversion later in life of these same infants. The bottom line is that all kids notice their environments and feel emotions, and that highly reactive kids appear to see and feel and react more, which is a strong indicator of either extroversion or introversion, depending on your level of reactiveness. Finally, a theory that emerged from some of this research is the orchid hypothesis. David Dobbs, the creator of the theory, defines it as many children are like dandelions, but able to thrive in just about any environment. But others are more like orchids. They wilt easily, but under the right conditions can grow strong and magnificent. This goes along closely with the 2 slides and sides of extroversion and introversion. For chapter 5, this is about the free will and temperament surrounding introversion and extroversion. The main idea for this chapter is the concept that we as people can stretch our personalities, but only to certain points. Cain highlights that our inborn temperaments are going to influence us no matter the things that we do and the lives that we live. So basically, free will that each of us has can push us in new directions, but not beyond our genetic limit. A great example of this is the two types of personalities found in Bill Gates and Bill Clinton. Bill Gates will never be Bill Clinton, regardless of how much he will work on his social skills. Conversely, Bill Clinton cannot reach Bill Gates' level, regardless of how much time he spends learning about computers. The two just don't mix. For you, it is up to you to find the sweet spot that will both grow you and keep you comfortable at the same time. Each of you have differences in your preferences for stimulation by your outside environments, like Chapter 4 explored. And there you will need to find the sweet spot between where you are optimally stimulated and where you aren't. Another key thing is to be conscious of how close you are or how far you are to it, which is the sweet spot, and adjust accordingly. That was the main thing from Chapter 5. Chapter 6, some of the central concepts are around sensitivity. Introversion and sensitivity are, from the studies done in the book, very closely related. In the book, Dr. Elaine Aron measures this heightened sense of sensitivity that may be a cornerstone of some introverts' greatest strengths, which is empathy. Empathy is the ability not just to intellectually understand what another person feels, but also to feel what they feel. She says that, in a sense, empathy is very similar to compassion, a word whose original meaning was to literally suffer with. So basically, introverts feel different things deeper and maybe more affected than extroverts would be by those same feelings and ideas around us. So the key takeaway from this chapter is that introverts as a whole are going to be more sensitive to information than extroverts around them would be. Additionally, it would be really helpful for introverts to consciously remember and be self-aware of the fact that it may be required to step away from a comfort zone in order to assure that the communication that you are providing when you deal with large audience actually hits the audience. And so that was the main thing from Chapter 6.
Hi, how's everybody doing? So, Chapter 7 of Quiet is about risk versus reward and the difference between the old brain and the new brain. The old brain has the amygdala, and it's the pleasure-seeking part of the brain. It releases dopamine every time we do activities like gamble, spend money, buy things, versus the new brain, which has the neocortex that evolved thousands of years after the old brain, and it's responsible for logic, reasoning, language, and Kane makes the argument that extroverts are more reward-oriented. They seek out that buzz in the old brain versus introverts that are less reward-oriented. They're able to remove themselves from the situation and really look at the risk and make decisions that are more responsible and kind of don't chase that buzz you get from the dopamine in your brain. And the reason why I included Warren Buffett on this slide is because she ends the chapter by talking about Warren Buffett, who's a really famous investor. He's got a lot of money from essentially, he is a self-proclaimed introvert, and he is less reward-oriented. He's able to remove himself from kind of the buzzing effects that you get from, say, spending money and investing really quickly. He's able to look at the risk and just make really informed decisions. Now, Chapter 8 is about the difference between Asian culture and American culture. So Kane went to Cupertino High School in California, and she interviewed a couple of the Asian students at the school. And they all said they felt really comfortable with who they were and very at ease at Cupertino High School. And the reason for this is because it focuses less on sporting events. One of the students told her that the library was the football stadium. So it was a very academic focused school. And a lot of the Asian students told her that in their culture, introversion is something that is looked upon as what's normally accepted. The less you talk, the more wise you are, that kind of thing. And one of the students that she interviewed later that he went on to Berkeley, and he felt a lot of social unease because he didn't fit in with the American culture at Berkeley. In America, people are more extroverts. It's better to be an extrovert. it's better to be more outgoing, to talk more, to really sell yourself. And that's why a lot of Asian Americans are having trouble in the business world in America, because presentations are key. You have to be able to sell yourself. You have to be able to get up in front of people and give a presentation about something you really don't care about. You have to be able to look at graphs and numbers and be able to persuade people. A big part of that is being able to sell yourself. And in an Asian culture, your work sells yourself. You don't need to be able to stand up and convince a bunch of people about. So as long as your work is good, your work ethic is good, that's the main thing. So a lot of Asian Americans are having trouble in America becoming extroverts. And this is kind of what chapter 9 is about. So Professor Brian Little, he was a professor at Harvard. He was an introvert, but he still gave some of the best lectures at Harvard. And the reason he was able to do this is because he recharged his batteries. That means he would find time during the day to be alone, whether it was in his office or bathroom. He would just spend time alone and really recoup his energy, because tending to be an extrovert when you're an introvert can be very draining, waste a lot of energy. So low versus high self-monitors, he was a high self-monitor. He was able to pretend to put on a different face to be an extrovert. Low self-monitors are really not capable of pretending to be somebody else. They really show their true inner feelings. They're not able to hide that as well. And the reason Professor Brian Little could pretend to put on a different face for such an extended period of time is because he had a free trade agreement, which kind of ties in recharging your batteries. He was able to make an agreement with himself that if he was going to be an extrovert during his lectures and during meetings, he would set time during the day where he could be alone, whether that was at home, reading a book by a fire. He could really just set time to spend with his wife and be alone, while during the day he would be an extrovert, go out of his way to be very social, and that's how he was able to be one of the best professors at Harvard University.
Chapter 10 starts with the communication gap. This refers to the lack of understanding between people who have opposite personality types. Extroverts often tend to want more socially out of their counterparts than introverts are comfortable with. This is especially true in personal relationships, but business ones as well. Chapter 10 then moves on to dealing with these introverts and their extroverts' relationships, where personality traits often cloud a partner from seeing the real intentions of the other as they express their emotions in different ways. Because of this, it is important to put yourself in your partner's shoes and be patient with them. The author reinforces this idea of understanding with the concept of hiss, don't bite, where the partner is allowed to be frustrated with the other's lack of understanding, but should not lash out in response. This practice is all about respecting each other's personal needs. Chapter 11. Chapter 11 goes into depth on having the right parent-child fit and how to adapt when this fit isn't right. More extrovert parents need to be more patient with their introverted child and respect that they are growing as they seem comfortable. This means parents should not readily pressure children into things they are not already ready for, like sports, if they do not enjoy them. One way extroverted parents can teach their children to be more ready for the real world is to help them project their confidence and highlight the characteristics they are most proud of, helping a child break out of their more introverted shell. In these few ways, the world can be more receptive of the different qualities of an introvert individual in today's society.